For centuries, the darkness was lit only by candles, oil lamps, or not at all. A new light would be made from gas produced by heating coal. That simple process would become the basis for a manufactured coal gas industry, which played a major role in shaping the modern world. Today, it is all but forgotten.
There are so few people left from my era. I was very young when I started, and that was sort of the end of the gas era, gas-making era. I was one of the few people who got in that young and went on to stay with the industry, especially the manufactured gas part of it. I sort of felt, I'm sure, like Lord Carnarvon and Howard Carter did when they stumbled on King Tut's tomb and said, when Carnarvon asked Howard Carter, what did he see? He said, I see wonderful things.
They shoveled coal, turned valves, removed ash. They were hard men who took courage in a new land and took a leap into a growing industry. They made the gas that heated our homes and lit our neighborhoods. America grew with the gas industry to become a country of power and prominence. The years 1850 to 1930 brought dynamic changes to the country. America moved from a nation of farmers to an industrial power, a world leader whose population grew from 7 million to over 100 million. Hard-working immigrants built the manufactured gas industry and pursued the American dream.
It's a story about light. And it's a story that precedes Edison's incandescent electric light bulb. It precedes the arc light. It goes back to the earliest days of the 19th century, when the only light that a city or a community was able to rely upon was tallow candles, was whale oil lamps on their streets. So it's a vehicle, it's a method in which America can light its streets. America can light the night.
Although the process of coal gasification had been demonstrated before, it took the American entrepreneur and showman, Rembrandt Peale, to excite the public imagination. On the evening of April 23, 1816, he demonstrated a spectacular new lighting method. With a talent for promotion and an eye towards profit, he quickly assembled 4 backers, formed a company, and on June 17, 1816, the Gaslight Company of Baltimore, America's first gas company, was formed.
Gas lights will be found extensively useful in any situation where much light is required, most especially in our growing manufactories. Gaslight is a discovery so brilliant a prospect of permanent usefulness to the country. David Melville, 1817.
Manufactured gas was produced from a simple technology. Coal was placed in a closed vessel called a retort, where it was baked until it released a blue-green gas, leaving behind only coke. The gas was scrubbed and purified to remove sulfur, ammonia, tars, and oil. Gas holders stored the clean gas until it was distributed through the city mains. The coked byproduct was used to heat other retorts or sold for heating in homes and industry.
That technology follows American expansion west across the Allegheny Mountains, down the Ohio River, to the Mississippi River, and it is driven by America's boundless supply of coal. Coal is everywhere in the United States, everywhere in the eastern United States. Every community in America in the 1840s and the 1850s wanted to have a gas plant because it was a source of civic pride. It was the way for a community, a small community the size of Terre Haute, Indiana, say, could compare and contrast itself to the big eastern metropolises, New York, Baltimore, places like that. And the editors are saying things like, finally we're civilized. We can light our streets at night. Our citizens can walk down the street without fear of falling into mud holes. It's a source of immense civic pride.
Saturday evening was an epoch in the history of Terre Haute, for our stores and business houses were then, for the first time, lit up with gas. The gas affords a most beautiful light and gives an air of life and comfort wherever it is used. We will be an illuminated city in a short time. Night walking will be brilliant. The Wabash Express, September 20th, 1856.
In 1832, Broadway was lit by gas lamps and became known as the Great White Way. The Chicago developer, Mrs. Trollope, advertised her new department store as a modern establishment with gas lighting on every floor. In 1848, gas lights were installed in the White House of President Zachary Taylor.
The introduction of gas light into the private home has been taken advantage of by the ladies, who, under protest against the glare and dazzling uncomfortableness of such bright light, deliberately spread parasols in an evening soiree. A pink parasol held between a lady's face and the gas burner throws a roseate hue over the complexion. Scientific American, 1847.
There were those who distrusted what they called making light from smoke. They thought the flame poured forth from the gas lamp like water from a spigot. And they had other curious ideas.
Of the dire calamity of influenza which has befallen our city and cut down our citizens of every class, the town committee recommends that a large number of coal kilns be burned, causing the city to be enveloped in a dense smoke. Certainly this would have a good sanitary effect. Savannah Morning News, September 15, 1876.
The gas company was actually treated as a health spa. This woman came to me, and she had a child who had a bad case of whooping cough, and the doctors couldn't do anything with it, and she was getting no relief. And she said that she wanted to bring her daughter into the gas company to get cured the way she had been cured by her mother when she was a little girl and had whooping cough and probably pneumonia.
The gas works are quite a resort for various classes of invalids who spend hours each day inhaling the odors. Milwaukee Republican Sentinel, December 17, 1882. How could I forget the gas lights in our lovely house? The music room had elaborate little cherubs holding out the flame. In the dining room there were charming fixtures of leaves and garlands. In the library, a cast-iron morning glory grew out of the wall, a gas flame flaring out from its trumpet. It was all very elegant, dramatic, warm. Another time with another kind of light.
By the Gilded Age, gaslight lit the nation's streets. The American skyline loomed up to define a new kind of city and a new kind of life. In 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge was completed. 5 years later, Coca-Cola patented its famous syrup. Citizens filled out their first IRS forms. Gas companies by the hundreds came into existence. The glow of gaslight was no longer a luxury. The industry now faced its first competition from Edison's incandescent light bulb.
The filament of the first practical incandescent lamp which I invented was of carbonized cotton thread. In the search for a better filament, I carbonized everything like it.
People stood overwhelmed with awe, as if in the presence of the supernatural. The strange, weird light, exceeded in power only by the sun, rendered the square as light as midday. Men fell on their knees. Groans were uttered at the sight.
You could put electric lights on the streets, you could put electric lights in your home, you could put electric lights in your business. And so the gas industry accepted that as a fait accompli. But what they do is they go out and start marketing gas as an ideal fuel for residential and commercial heating and for residential and commercial cooking. But what they are pitching, what the gas companies are pitching, is convenience, okay? You no longer have to stoke that coal-fired stove. You no longer have to stoke that wood-fired stove.
The modern stoves are convenient. You don't have to start them up. Just turn them on and it's ready instantly. No ashes, no dirt, and cheaper than gasoline and coal oil. The Gaslight and Coal Company of New Albany, 1900. A gas log in the library, a gas lamp in the hall, a gas range in the kitchen, a gas light in the hall, a gas water heater for the house, what else is there to say? A gas meter in the cellar which tells us what to pay. When the bill is rendered, the family gaily sings, isn't it a trifling cost for so many useful things? There are very few cities where the gas is equal to ours. Our company includes the most complete works in the country, with gasometers holding up to 400,000 feet of gas. Large coal houses, repair shops, up to 80 miles of main pipe meters, a massive gas house with 15 retorts, each producing 700,000 feet in a 24-hour period. About 100 hands are employed.
At the beginning of the century, the gas business was an indispensable part of over 1,000 communities. The marketing of cooking gas and innovations like the Welsbach mantle, a white hot burner that produced a light comparable to the best electric lights of the day, kept the industry in the American mainstream. The gas industry was not only at the heart of communities, but with the coming of the First World War, a force in the life of the nation. With the embargo of Germany, the world leader in dye production, America developed its own chemical and dye industry from coal tar byproducts.
All of those dyes originally were from coal tar dyes, and they came out of gas plants. The first plastic of any sort was Bakelite, which was a mixture of phenol, which was a byproduct of coal gas, and formaldehyde. So essentially the first plastic came out of a gas plant. And the entire chemical industry got its feedstocks from gas plants.
By World War II, the government was on a crash program to develop dozens of applications from coal tar, including benzene for gasoline, toluene for explosives, pyridine for sulfur drugs, anthracene for insulating optical equipment, and asphalt for war-zone tarmacs.
The manufactured gas business disappears from the American scene in a fairly short period of time. And this happens primarily in the years after World War II. And the manufactured gas business is replaced by natural gas. Manufactured gas is one of the first great industrial enterprises in American society. It's what our forebears described as progress. It's this big plant that not everybody understood all the sophistication of the technology, but they understood that by burning coal and pulling off the gas, you could create a product that would enrich their lives.
I'd like to, give it a personal side, because it was made up of people, and it was made up of very dedicated people. I made some of my closest friends and relationships happened with the people I worked with. The feeling of belonging to a self-sustaining group, it was almost a family feeling that you don't seem to have in business today. Everybody knew everybody else. They knew all of their kids. They went to their weddings. They went to birthday parties. Very closely knit. And I think it all has to do with the fact that there was a common purpose, and that was to, serve the community.
They all sponsor their own company baseball teams. You always find a picture of these guys with their baseball caps and the old horsehide palm gloves that they used in the 1910s and the 1920s. So I mean, there was this identification with the company baseball team, with baseball, with America, with mom, with apple pie, whatever you want to call it. But that was there, and it went back to the very earliest days.
We bemoan the fact that, well, you don't get a permanent job anymore. It's not a job for life. Well, those were. Anybody who went to work for a public utility when I started, right after World War II, was pretty much guaranteed a job for life.
So the people who actually worked in the plants themselves were very often the immigrant members of the community. The idea that somebody can start out working in a manufactured gas plant in Terre Haute, Indiana, or Carbondale, Illinois, and work his way up to become a so-called captain of industry, and the stories of gas company executives who started shoveling coal in the boilers. And I think it's part of the American dream.
So we'll go upstairs to see what we can find up here. I can just picture this, 60 years ago. But it would have just been a beehive of activity, and here's where it was a lot noisier, because those stack lids, those big round things on the end of pistons, would periodically be opening and closing, and every time they did, I think I described it to you as a sort of a bahoo.
I've seen many men come into the plant at that time, work 2 hours and leave. Some of them never even drew their pay. You talk about hot, it was nothing unusual. I have walked through #1 house and be as close as you are to me and could hardly see you. I mean, for the smoke and for the heat, it was a dirty, hard job. Some of the old-time retirees would take tires and cut them and put on the bottom of our shoes to keep the heat because it was so hot.
It would be hot because these machines would be running, and even though they were well insulated, you wouldn't want to do too much leaning up against these shelves like this. It might be 180, 190, and if the machine were old and hadn't been insulated in a long while and re-bricked, then it could actually be hotter than that. When you think back to the first part of the last century, the middle part of the last century, and you look at some of the old drawings, and if you're lucky enough later to have photos of some of the equipment that was designed and so forth, these people yet were doing some very highly sophisticated things at that time. And they were designing wonderful, complicated, beautifully conceived engines. Here was an important industry, important to the progress of the United States, and played a key role in the development of this country.
You'd go crazy in those generator houses because the work was so hard. I mean, many a time we have left this plant and we'd get up to the corner and stop in the tap room, and most of us would go to sleep, but many of us get on the trolley car. I know I did many a time. I lived at 9th and Montgomery, 8th and Columbia, really, and many a time I rode my stop, went right by my stop. I'd be so tired. Go all the way to the end of the line on 15 trolley and then have to come all the way back. When you got up near Richmond Street, they'd smell you before you even got there. They knew you came from the gas house because it was almost impossible to get that scent off of you. My wife used to say to me many, many times when I walk up on the porch, she said, I know it's about your time to come in. I can smell you.
This is the control manifold, what was left of it, where the gas maker stood and surveyed everything that he was doing. He had his control board on the right where he had all the readings, temperature measurements and so forth, and he would control the amount of gas and the quality of the gas that he made. There existed in a gas plant a tremendous competition between gas makers and between shifts. And you would have games where they'd play. You'd actually have guys spying, coming back on their own time, and coming in and maybe climbing up and looking in the window to see what Fitzy was doing different than what they did, because he had a better make per hour and a make per shift than they did.
We had in the generator houses a gang known as the Clinkermen. They were the lifeblood of the company back during those days. In fact, those men were the unsung heroes of the gas company because they never really got any acclaim. As I stayed on board, I became a Clinkerman. Now let me tell you what a Clinkerman is all about. You had maybe 16, 17-foot bars, steel bars. You had a 16-pound sludge. One man would stand on one side, the other man would stand on the other side with the sledgehammer, and that's how you got through the clinker. See, in order to get the clinker, it would fuse, so you had to break it up in order to get it out. And I've seen men work 12, 14, 15 hours a day trying to get one machine clean so we could get it back into operation. It was a hard, hard job.
And it was red hot, and it's as hard as steel. It weighs a ton, and well, you can see that if I drop it. I spent a lot of time on floors like this. I spent a lot of time with problems, all kinds of, middle of the night emergencies. This whole row across the bottom here were pressures, various pressures were within the machine. Generator number 1, inlet, outlet of seal, that was holder pressure, inlet of seal, bottom of superheater, oil pressure. Machines of this size would probably make 150 to 200,000 cubic feet of gas an hour. If my arithmetic is not faulty, would supply each hour 1,000 homes. The one thing about the gas business was that the flame could never go out. You could never stop. You must some way, your own ingenuity, some way you had to keep going. You had to keep the plant running. There was no saying, well, we're broke down, we've got to wait for a part from Cleveland or something. You couldn't do that. If you didn't have the part, you made it. They always had another way to jump. That was what was interesting about the gas men. That was one of their favorite comments. Always have another way to jump. Don't rely on just one way because you might get caught.
And we made gas whether the temperature was 90 degrees or whether it was 5 degrees, because that was the only way you could fill these holes.
If the wind was blowing and the snow was drifting so that you had snow building up on one side of that hole or not, you'd begin to disturb this balance. Now, if carried to an extreme, could lead to a number of things. The worst ones would be a holder wreck, just like a shipwreck, a holder wreck. So what do you have to do? you had to shovel the snow off the top of the holder. And so the only way to do that is to send men out onto this curving structure, steel, wet steel, with snow shovels in the middle of a blizzard to shovel them off. And I've done that myself. Here you are, 210 feet up in the air with maybe just a rope tied around you. And you're doing that so that the holder doesn't wreck, so that the supply isn't interrupted. You look up at the side of one of these huge generators, and it's glowing red. The steel is glowing red. And if it goes any further, it will glow white, and it may even melt, and you'd have a blow through, a very dangerous situation. And so you'd get your mason in, and he would be there, first poking stuff up there, maybe with a stick. Sometimes I've even seen them making up balls of refractory material and throwing it up into the opening, trying to build that up enough so that they could be shielded and to keep them from, so that they could get up there and finish the patch job. And during this period of time, I did this myself. I had to do it once. I remember being called on to have a fire hose, not a fire hose, it was a garden hose, and keeping the man who was doing that soaking wet so his clothes wouldn't burst on fire. It was a life-threatening situation. And they didn't think anything about doing that. They didn't protest and say, that's too hard. We can't do that, or we won't do that. Well, it just wasn't done. And so you had this whole group of people, all dedicated, and in the back of their minds, subconsciously, they know that service must never be interrupted. And as I said, this leads to more of a community of people, all self-contained and all together, which give you a certain closeness. It's like an old glove, that I found, and I sit and look at it for a while and remember things. Cold nights and hot days, and especially the people. They had a real tie to it.